This morning's scripture is from Matthew chapter 2. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out. And there, ahead of them, went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. Then they saw that the star had stopped. They were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. In the days leading up to Thanksgiving 2017, one of the things on our mind was Sarah's final semester. She had more than enough credits to graduate, but she had not yet had a biological science. She had not yet taken a biological science, which was a requirement for graduation. And the day before Thanksgiving, Lynette got off the phone with her and she said, "Guess what? Sarah is going to take astrology." I said, "What?" She said, "She's going to take astrology." Now, I had gone to Millsaps 30 plus years earlier, and I was a little disturbed to hear that they were teaching astrology, because that's not really a science. And of course, what she was going to take was astronomy. But there are astrologers, and there were astrologers, people who studied the movements and the array of stars and planets. Years before astronomy as a science came to be a thing. These wise men showing up from the east, they're astrologers. They were people who studied the movement of stars and planets and tried to discern from that its meaning for human existence. They were not subjects of the Roman Empire. They were from the Persian Empire, which was beyond the borders of the Roman Empire, outside of Palestine, outside of Israel. They were, in fact, a little, or more than a little, weary of the Roman Empire and the emperor and of his deputies, people like Herod, who had been given administrative and law enforcement control of the region of Palestine. They had given him the title king, king of the Jews, but he wasn't even Jewish. He had just been given that title. And he knew that not everyone among the Jews viewed him as legitimate. They were grateful, some of them were, for the work. He was someone who did a lot of infrastructure. He built temples. He was in the process of remodeling and rebuilding the Jerusalem temple as a way both to curry favor with the religious Jews and to give jobs in construction to hundreds, thousands, maybe more, tens of thousands of workers. Stonemasons, perhaps, like the builder Joseph. Joseph is called a tekton. That's a builder. It can be someone who works with wood. It can be someone who works with stone. Maybe he had found work working on the temple, or his relatives had. These astrologers from the east see something in the sky. This past month, last month, there was a convergence of Saturn and Jupiter that created a bright light that could be seen without a telescope on December 21st. And there was speculation maybe that was the Jerusalem star. Maybe that was the Bethlehem star. We don't know. Astronomy didn't get its start until about 1,500 years after this time, until the time of Copernicus and Galileo later, where scientific principles were applied to the study of the stars. We know when that convergence has happened during the time of astronomy. We don't know when it's happened other times. But there was something unusual in the sky. And they discerned it had something to do with Israel. And they show up at Herod's palace. Now, I'm going to say they're called magi, they're called wise. I'm not sure how wise it was to show up at Herod's palace asking about a new king of the Jews. Matthew tells us Herod was afraid. He was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. All Jerusalem knew that when Herod was afraid, it was a time of danger. Herod was always certain people were plotting against him. The reason why he believed people were plotting against him was that people were plotting against him. He had executed his favorite wife, Mariamne, because he believed she was plotting against him. That's because she was plotting against him. He had executed 2 of his sons, believing they were plotting against him, because they were plotting against him. There was a saying, it's better to be Herod's pig than to be his son. And here come these odd-looking men from the Persian Empire asking about a king of the Jews, a new king of the Jews, in the palace of the current king of the Jews. He doesn't care much for hearing there's a rival. And he asks the religious experts, where does the king of the Jews come from? And they look into the prophets and say, the king of the Jews comes from Bethlehem. That was David's city. That's where it would come. That's where a new king of the Jews would come from. And Herod is disturbed. He's frightened. And he's probably not very good at controlling his face. He's talking to these wise men, and I'm thinking he looks angry. He looks afraid. They're sensitive to his facial expression, to his words. And maybe they're thinking to themselves, maybe this wasn't such a wise move. Maybe he's going to have it in for us. But he sends them to look. They have perceived something new is happening. Beyond the territory of the Jews. Beyond the religion of the Jews. All the way in the Persian Empire, God has signaled to these people that he's up to something. And they want to know what it is. They are attentive to their world. And they look. And they find Jesus. And our Psalms say they were 3 kings. Well, we don't know they were 3, and they weren't kings. Some traditions have even given them names and ethnicities. All of that is filling in details that Matthew didn't give us. There are, though, 3 gifts. Gold for royalty, frankincense for priesthood, and myrrh, a burial spice. Somehow they knew that Jesus would be a king, and so had gold. That he'd be a priest, and so had frankincense. And he'd be a martyr, so they had a burial spice for him, for myrrh. And now they found him, and they go to sleep. And our dreams are the way we organize our impressions, our thoughts, things we haven't been able to completely work out while we're awake. Our dreams are a way of clarifying things. And they realize for sure Herod is dangerous. He's dangerous to them. He's dangerous to the child. And they go home by another way. Convinced now that God has been at work doing something, and doing something new through this child. And when they get home, they tell the story. They tell of what's happened. And 30 or 40 years later, people telling the story of Jesus come. And God has been preparing the ground for that story to be heard. Were they still alive when the representatives of Jesus came? We don't know. But people had heard the story. And people were ready to be a part of this new thing God was doing through Jesus. We pay attention. All kinds of unusual things are coming our way. New diseases, new advice about the diseases, new events in our collective life. And we long for precedented times. We long to be able to put these new things into perspective, and yet God keeps doing something new and asking us, are you ready? Are you attentive? We go forward. We go into the new thing together.